Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you for joining us and Happy New Year. If you're listening on New Year's Day, then that is an extra special Happy New Year to you. If you're not listening on New Year's Day, then let's make this year an absolutely fantastic one, shall we? So 2024, here we are. We are in it. We are at the start of it. 2023 is no more. And that sounds a little bit daunting, doesn't it? You know, you've got a whole year ahead of you. And you think, wow, what could that mean? What could 2024 mean? You'll have a whole 365 days, maybe a few less if you're watching after the episode release, to do what with? What do you want to do with it? And I think that's the important question. It's not so much what could you do with it, but what do you want to do with this year? I like to think of New Year's as a new opportunity to do what you really want to do with it. And I know I've just repeated myself. One of my New Year's resolutions is not to repeat myself on this podcast because I keep doing that. And I like to think that if we're thinking in a 2-year span, we are right in the middle. Think back to last year, the start of 2023, and the end of that scale, the end of 2024. We have the whole entirety of 2024 to look forward to. We're in the middle, which means we've just done the entirety of 2023. Now, before we go rushing ahead, making resolutions, thinking about what we want to do, thinking about what we could do or should do, this, that, and the other, I think it's important to take a look back and really take some time to digest over the year what it is that we've done and everything that we've accomplished. And so we can wrap up 2023, come to terms with it, recognize the good, the bad, so that we have ammunition to move forward to into 2024. An important exercise and something valuable worth recognizing is that I think this goes for everybody. If you look back to the beginning of 2023 and look at who you are now, I can almost say with confidence, complete confidence, that whoever you are, wherever you're listening from, you are not the same person as you were. And a quote which has really, really kind of defined so much of what I've been doing over this past year is from Heraclitus. And it is, "No man ever steps in the same river twice, for it is not the same river, and he is not the same man." You're not the person that you were at the beginning of 2023. An entire year has elapsed. Many changes have come about that, some of which were your choice, some of which were not. But you've seen it through, and here you are now, and you are different as a result of that. And if we take that and we apply that to the year we're about to face, by the end of 2024, you won't be the same person. You will endure change, both external and internal. And I think that can be a source for optimism and opportunity, but also it has the potential for agency, meaning you have a choice over that change. You have a choice how you meet the end of 2024 as you are now meeting the end of 2023. The person you become, the person that you change as a result into, you have a choice over. You get to become the person that you decide you want to be. And hopefully with today's episode, we can emphasize the importance of looking back, taking the positive, accepting everything that happened, recognizing what happened, so that when we do take those first few steps forward, we are ready and we are resolved, knowing who we are, what it is that we want, and how we're going to get there by the end of 2024. So let's get into that. First and foremost, let's have a little look back at where we were. At the end of the year, a whole year has passed. Let's take a little bit of time to digest what has happened. Now, I'm going to set the challenge for this week a little bit early. Also, just a little foot. And I say that, you know, in my reels on Instagram and in the episodes, I say take the time. And that can be, I can imagine it'll be a little bit confusing for people. It would have been at one time for me. But what I mean is there are so many things pulling our attention every which way. There are so many things that we can be filling our time with, especially now as we're getting older. I mean, I'm becoming more of an adult, more responsibilities, more this, that, and the other. There are lots more things which are pulling my time away in different directions. So when I say take some time, it's taking control back over that time, affording yourself that time and giving it to yourself, because it in itself is an investment. We are going to take some of that time before we go rushing forward into everything that's about to come, and look back. So from the lesson of journaling, this kind of comes with that. So reflecting, retrospect, this is essentially what it is that we're doing this week. Me personally, I like to write, and I think writing can be an excellent tool for this. Plus, if you were to write these things down, then you have them there. You not only have them out of your head, but you have them on paper, you have them somewhere you can refer to, and throughout the year you can refer back to. So there are certain things that I'd like for us to go over, to look back, for you as an individual to take the time and, like questions to answer for yourself. But it's going to be 2023 in retrospect kind of thing. Okay, number 1. What did you accomplish? Ask yourself, what are the things that I did? Not so much just what it is that you did. What are the things that you laboured over? What are the things that you worked towards, that you wanted, that you got, that you did and you achieved? What are they? Who are you grateful for? Who throughout the past year has really stood out, who has really done something for you, has really helped you to be who you are, or has really gone out of their way to help you? Who are the people that stand out? What are you grateful for? What is it that you've done for yourself, or you've done for somebody else? Or what is it that's a part of the wider world which has helped make you feel a better person, or has helped you become the person that you are, or that you wanted to be? What are you grateful for? What did you overcome? What were the hurdles and obstacles? What were the things that you were afraid of? What were the things that stood in your way from getting what it is that you really wanted, that you faced and you overcame? What was that mountain? What were those little hurdles that you kept having to endure, kept having to overcome? What are your best memories? This is a positive one. I enjoyed this one. What are the things and the moments throughout the past year that really stand out to you? What do you look back on, and what do you have the most joy in relishing in that moment again? And lastly, what are your proudest moments? What are the things that in the entirety of last year you can really hold yourself high about, that really fill your heart with that accomplishment, that really stand out amongst all the other moments, that you can say, yeah, I did that. And this is all, like I said, and it's an investment. These are the things which we're going to carry on over into next year. But it's also that reflection, that processing of the entirety of the year means that we can accept the past. We have it. The best parts that we want to carry forward, we now have those. And you can move forward with them, not having to worry too much about what it is that we're leaving behind, because we've taken the best from it and we're moving forward with it. Now, I have done this. I thought it would be good to provide examples. I thought that might help. And plus, I also want to share these things with you. And in the manner of sticking by the beliefs of the podcast, I want to be open, honest, and transparent with you guys. And I want to lead by example. So I've done these as well. This is my present journal, by the way. Journal number 4. Okay, so accomplishments. You don't have to do any set number of them. Like some of them you might have 1 or 2, but they could be really significant. Some of them you might have 10, but they're a little bit more minor. Some of them might rank more than the other, but it doesn't matter. Accomplishments. this year, I got a job in the industry that I have a degree in. I travelled alone to another country. There was someone on the other side waiting for me, but for somebody who has lived such a sheltered life, or has lived a sheltered life because of my mental illness, that was a significant step for me. And I felt that I grew a lot as an individual for having done that. I started my own podcast. I won my second fight. And I recently got through the application process for the fire service. Who am I grateful for? I'm grateful for my boss, Gary. I'm only doing first names, don't worry. I'm grateful that he's been kind to me, that he's flexible, and that he is patient with me. I'm grateful for my team at the gym, for being there for me, for pushing me, for supporting me, and for believing in me. I'm grateful for Tom at the fire service or at my station, for wanting to see me through the process and for being as helpful as he has been to me. I'm grateful for my boys at the podcast, Adam and Ryan, for believing in this and sharing the belief that I have, and actually showing me the effort and the want to make this into something which could ultimately be something for somebody who really needs it to be. And I'm grateful for Brandon. I'm grateful for Brandon because throughout the entirety of the 9-month process, where it started with him, he could have so easily have given up on me. He could have so easily have written me off all the times that I said, it is happening. We are getting there. We're one step closer. Look at this. I'm grateful that he didn't write me off. I'm grateful that he didn't close that door. And I'm grateful that on the day where it did finally happen, he showed up. He gave so much of himself, and I said in the last podcast, and you can probably tell in that episode that we did with him when you see it, that I got so much out of it. It was such a gratifying moment for me, very cathartic. I'm grateful for my family, for the love and the support that they've always shown me, and they consistently show me regardless of all the mistakes I make, of all the lessons that I'm learning along the way. And I'm grateful for them for always having my best interests at heart. That means the absolute world to me. And I'm grateful for all of my friends, for when I fall, they're always there to help me back up. No, that's not how I said it when we wanted to say it. I'm grateful for my friends for being there to help me back up when I fall on my own. I'm grateful for them for giving me a social life. Believe it or not, I didn't really have a social life at the start of the year, let alone last year. So now that I have that, they are an integral part of that. And that's something I'm very grateful for. And I'm grateful that around them I can be less serious. I think in my own personal life, I treat things very seriously because the things that I do mean ever such a lot to me. So to have that outlet where I can be less serious and take a load off, I wouldn't be the same without it. So what are the things that I'm grateful for? This year I'm grateful for listening to my heart, for being such a predominantly brain-orientated individual for so long, so much that it caused me an illness, and so much that for years I had to build defences to compensate for that. This year I've started listening to my heart and realising that my heart will always tell the truth, and it will always tell my truth. So finding silence and listening to what my heart has to say, particularly when faced with a difficult decision. I'm grateful for finding balance, or I don't want to say I found balance because I've only really begun understanding it. And I don't want to say that I've completed it because there's not a chance, not nearly there. But I've begun to appreciate that balance is not sitting in the middle of two extremes. It's not sitting on the fence between both extremes. The key to balance is understanding and utilising both extremes when appropriate. It's being able to choose and have the discipline to appropriately choose when one extreme is needed over the other. A little quote which has helped me appreciate balancing both extremes is by Nietzsche. "Of all evil I deem you capable. Therefore I want good from you. Verily I have often laughed at the weaklings who thought themselves good because they had no claws." And what that tells me is that everybody is capable of doing bad things, but he who thinks himself incapable of doing bad things because he hasn't given himself the capacity to do things is not noble. He is noble who knows that he is capable of doing bad things or doing evil, but instead chooses to do good. So it's understanding both sides of the scale, both sides of the seesaw, but choosing which one at the right time when appropriate. As a little throw-in. I'm grateful for morning walks, especially in the latter half of the year, taking the time to just get up as soon as I wake up, go for a walk. Oh, it's been so lovely, so wonderful, regardless of the weather, regardless of the time of the year. Getting your blood flowing, getting that fresh air, getting grounded. And it's also an opportunity to be amongst nature and to do a couple mindful practices. If someone were to see me walking in the morning, there's a good chance you'll hear me chuntering away at myself. I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? But that's just me using that opportunity to be connected with nature, to be connected with myself, and to practice things that I'm grateful for, things that I love. So morning walks have been wonderful for starting my day right. And I'm also grateful for taking risks and deciding to walk my own path. If I didn't take risks, I wouldn't have come as far as I have today, and I would be a lot further behind. And I know that's a bit of a given, but I'm grateful for taking those risks, and I'm grateful for walking my own path. That means taking that leap of setting sail from the safety of shore and trying to find my own way, starting the podcast, taking a step back from a regular salaried job, and taking that risk of something which, should I give the appropriate amount of myself to, the appropriate effort, time, consistency, and belief, that I hope will one day pay off. It's difficult because it means I have to make sacrifices, but I'll get there. What did I overcome? I overcame living each day to force my tomorrow. I know that sounds strange, but the first about third of the year, I was so hell-bent on making something of my year, of making something of myself, of getting a job in the industry, of creating something, of getting the ball rolling and getting my future started, that I sacrificed every single day, essentially, with the hope of creating a stepping stone for tomorrow. So my every day was spent just literally paving the step for tomorrow. I never really got anywhere for it, and I certainly wasn't living. I gave so much of myself, but it wasn't ever really, I grew from it, but I was so unhappy. I was so miserable. Time flew by, but that's because I took no time to appreciate where I was, what I had, or just to live. I lived my life in the hope of a better tomorrow, but that meant sacrificing every single day. And that wasn't worth it, because it made me miserable. It made me burn out. And it made my depression start to creep back in. So after reaching a breaking point and having a little bit of an intervention with my family, because they saw that I was getting fucking miserable, I learned to start living a little bit more, start being present, and start letting go. And I overcame avoidance. I overcame putting things off, difficult things. I learned to confront them. I learned to look them in the eye and do the things that I didn't want to do. I overcame avoidance. And what I mean by that is I overcame spending my time procrastinating and dilly-dallying and putting my attention to other little things which I thought were important in the hopes that I could avoid this one big thing which I really needed to do. I learned the error of that because I got 100 meaningless things done, but this one big thing was still hanging over me. And I learned to just get on with it, do with it. Mark Twain says at the start of each day, you should swallow a frog. And I know that isn't entirely relevant to what it is that we're saying, but if you can get that big thing done first, then do it, because the rest of it will feel like a breeze. An additional thing, when writing out what did I overcome, I had more responses for how did you grow. So instead of focusing on the thing which you had to beat, how also did you become a better person because of that? What did you gain from that? How did you become more than you were before because of that thing? I learned to let go. That was massive. Letting go of my future. I had this analogy in my head. I meditated one day and it all kind of made sense to me that if my life was a tree, my roots were being fed from the ground, the energies and everything that I gave to it. The trunk was who I am today, and the branches that I had were all the things that I wanted to do with my life. So the kickboxing, the podcast, work, starting my career, this, that and the other. What I was doing was I was holding so deathly tight to the branches. I was trying so hard to control them, control tomorrow, what was not yet part of the present moment. The branch that does not bend with the wind breaks. And I saw that if I was this tree and my future words are branches, I was holding so deathly tight onto them that I was trying to stiffen them, trying to keep them under my control, that if a strong enough wind blew, that these branches would completely snap away. I had to let go control of these branches, of these things in my future, because I couldn't control the wind. The wind was external. And I was only putting myself in greater harm's way by trying to hold on to something which I had no control over. So what I thought I'd do instead was learning to live, using the nourishment that I got from my roots to enrich myself, and enriching myself at the present. That meant that I'd be a better person that day than I was yesterday. And that over time would compound into being a better person overall. Learning about the power of taking action. Now this comes from avoidance. It's taking that leap, it's taking that jump and doing, rather than sitting, thinking, worrying. If you just do it, take that action, movement, progress forwards. You'll either get it right or you won't, but don't ever be afraid of getting it wrong. Don't ever let the worrying and the thinking stop you from actually taking that action, because even if you do get it wrong, you're either the only thing that will happen is you'll learn how to do it better next time, and then you have the opportunity to try again. You can humble yourself, you can learn the essence of humility, and then you can go again. So, two birds, one stone. You've not only learned more about humility and being humble, but you have another opportunity to get that thing that you originally wanted. Hey, who knew? Failing and not succeeding, pretty cool. I became more socially confident. When I started a job at the supermarket, my one initial goal for the entirety of the time that I was there was to become more socially confident. Before that, I wasn't really. Like I said, I was coming out of the mouth of the cave of this social isolation, which I'd been in for about 6 years. So I was only seeing the new light, and it was all a bit scary, but that was my opportunity. And in this past year alone, my goodness, through practice, through that intention, through the goal of wanting to become more socially confident, I'm not doing too badly. Sometimes I have conversations with strangers. Fuck me, who knew? I've begun to learn inner peace and silence. This comes from letting go. This comes from being more present, being more centered, and being myself. And how did I grow? By meeting fear eye to eye, by not turning away, by looking it in the eye, by confronting it and knowing that fear can be productive. It's natural. But as I said, as Carl Jung says, where your fear is, there is your task. So looking fear eye to eye will always help you grow. It's the difference between fear and anxiety is completely unproductive. It's irrational fear. Whereas if it's fear, it can be rational, but you can also treat it. You can look it in the eye and you can do something productive with it. So fear isn't always bad. My best memories were taking a trip to Germany, seeing my friend. I was blown away by how hospitable he was and the life that he'd made for himself. I was so proud of him for being the first of us to take such a big leap into his future and for taking that risk. Seeing the life that he'd made for himself and giving me a piece of that. I won't be forgetting it anytime soon. Thank you, Luke. I was watching the fireworks in Winchester in the pouring rain from across the other side of the city. That one happened recently, but I'm not forgetting that anytime soon either. Howling in laughter with my old friend. We were reunited. I'm hoping to one day get him on as a guest on the podcast. But it was the first time I'd properly seen him or spent time with him in a social environment. Numerous times throughout the night, we were absolutely howling with laughter, just really getting on each other. And yeah, I haven't laughed like that in, I can't remember how long. Thank you, Ross. My dad telling me how proud of me he is. This one happened last week, but in regards to the fire service and the podcast, both of which were things that, were dreams, were ideas, were things that I wanted to do, but, I am a bit of a romantic and a bit of an idealist. I have these big lofty ambitions, but it took so long to get them to where they are now that to see them both come to fruition and for him to recognise what it means to me and the fact that I'd done it, and then for him to go and tell me, yeah, it wasn't bad. I got a bit emotional when I was writing that one down earlier. I was thinking, oh fuck, is this going to be the day that I cry on the podcast? But no, I seem to be all right. Not today, unlucky, maybe next time. The day after my fight, one of my best memories was just walking the dog. It was a stunning day and I felt so light. I felt so effortless. I felt so unburdened. Like, I can't explain it. I was so utterly present. I had not a single thought in my mind. All the mental training, all the preparation that I'd done had paid off, but it carried over into that next day, and I felt so utterly present and so utterly at peace. Yeah. I will be striving to get that feeling back for a long time. And I will, eventually. It's a work in progress. But it seems as though it takes some effort. Proudest moments. I saved a man's life this year. I got my first aid course in the first couple months of the year. Little did I know that the first instance wherein I would have to use that would be a man having a full-blown heart attack in the supermarket where I worked. But I didn't think about it, leapt straight into action, gave him CPR, did my bit, and he ended up surviving. So, yeah, taking action saved a man's life. That one was pretty massive. I'm pretty damn good at not giving myself the credit for the things that I do, not taking the time to say to myself, you actually did that. Like, that was a good job. Like, well done. I don't take time. I don't do that for myself. I find it all too easy to move on, say, okay, what's on to the next? But the fact that I'd saved somebody's life, that was something that, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't take away from myself. So that was a big one. Filming the first episode with a guest, with Brandon. Now, I've mentioned this in a couple reels, and I might have done so on the podcast, but at the start of the year, him being the very start, him being a part of the day where the podcast was conceived in my mind, through some weird chance, seeing him on that day, and it took about 9 months to get to the point where we filmed him and actually did it. To do it, as I mentioned earlier, was a very cathartic experience, and it's one which really kind of encapsulated the journey that it took to get to that point. So I'm proud of that. This year, after 7 years of hard work, of uphill struggle, of deciding to turn my life around, earlier this year, I began believing in myself. And I know that's probably the most significant one. I started seeing what I was capable of doing. And like I say about being ready for something, you'll never wake up one day and a light switch will be flicked and you'll be ready. It is that accumulation over time of making yourself ready. And this year, it took me 7 years to do it. Every single day in, day out. New struggle, same old struggle, whatever it was. But I began believing in myself. And those 7 years, every single day I would do again. I don't take back or regret any of those single days, because the feeling of believing in myself was so utterly worth it. I still believe in myself now. It's just I know that I have the capability to do the things that I want to do, knowing that I can do those things. And this is a big one as well. I mean, the previous one was more sentimentally significant, but this year I told both of my parents individually that I loved them. It took a long time, but that's the old heart box working. So we got there eventually. All right, that's all of them. So that's my examples. I know that took a while, but hopefully that gives you an example of how to do them yourself. So now that I've got mine out of the way and I've given you a bit of an example, if you do this challenge, if you do this part of this week's podcast, I would love to know what it is that you've got. You don't have to share everything. You can share one thing or two things. You don't have to share anything at all. But if you're willing to, we would absolutely love to hear how you're celebrating the end of 2023. And if you go to airingitoutpodcast.com, I'd love to hear it so much. Genuinely, that would be amazing. So resolutions. Now we are looking forward to 2024. Big scary, don't know what's happening, can't tell what's going to happen, but let's try to see what we can do about that. Now, I don't have a beef with resolutions as it is. Like, I wrote down the definition of resolution because I was like, what does that actually mean? A firm decision to do or not do something. That is the definition of resolve. And now I use resolve quite a lot because for me, it's that definitive yes or no. I am going to do something reinforced by will. But I think when you're facing a new year and something that you see that is important to you, that you want to do moving forward, I think that cut and dry, yes or no, black and white, it's not very sustainable. I mean, think about what we're up against. You're just coming at the end of 2023. You just had Christmas and New Year's, festive, jolly times. Those have been the incentives, the rewards at the end of the darkening of the seasons, September, October, November, December, Christmas, New Year's, fantastic. But now you're on the other side of it. January, February, fuck me. Worst months of the year. So of all the times to decide to do something significant with your life, to change things around, to say yes or no, I am doing this thing or I am not doing this thing, we've somehow managed to pick the two hardest months of the year to try and do that at the beginning of. So people get to however long, and there's always a statistic floating around, I don't have it with me today, that says X amount of people finish after this amount of time with their resolutions, and that's kind of it. It's kind of tossed away. So, ideally, if there were a time that we'd set resolutions, it would be perhaps when things are starting to take a change for the better. March, April time, where the days are getting a bit longer, weather's getting a bit better. But we've got to work with the cards that we've been dealt, don't we? So I've come up with a few ways of how we can go about ensuring, or at least giving ourselves a better chance at seeing these resolutions through until at least things start getting better, or perhaps, ideally, end of the year. Come on. So I've written a list of tips for setting goals. And I know this is a resolution, but honestly, a resolution to me just seems like a goal in disguise, or a goal wearing a different hat. So how different are they really? And if you give yourself a little bit more of a relaxed approach, not so cut and dry, then that puts a little bit less pressure on yourself. And it means you can afford yourself a bit of flexibility in getting to that place, because it's the getting there. And if by some chance you don't get there, then there's a good chance you'll punish yourself for that. Or you might feel less of yourself for not doing it. We don't want to do that. We want you to get there. We want to incentivize you getting there. So I've got some tips and tricks for how we can do that. Okay, so tip number 1. Know what you really want. So I mentioned about opportunities, and I mentioned about being in the middle of this 2-year span. We've done 2023. Now we are looking forward to the end of that span at the end of 2024. Now, something that has always worked for me, or something that's been really beneficial, is whenever you've got a period of time to do something within, you have the opportunity to say to yourself, by the end of this period of time, I could either have done something and then achieved this at the end of it, or I could have done nothing and nothing changes. It's that thing of, if you don't change anything, nothing changes. You have this window where you can say to yourself, I can act and have this thing by the end of that time period, or not. So we have a nice, healthy amount of time to get something done. Now, if we're going to identify things that we want done, we want to know just what it is that we are doing. You want to know what you really want. And if you set a goal that you only really want 80% of, you do want it, you want it a lot, but not wholeheartedly. There's a chance that 80% of the way down the line, 8 or 9 months into the year, you could falter, because you went at it after this long, but it starts to kind of crumble underneath you from where it wasn't, completely from within. It wasn't completely from the depths of your heart. So when you're setting your goals, when you're identifying the things that you want to have achieved by the end of the year, or the things that you want to change about yourself now, you've got to really want them. And that can take time to understand. But you have this entire year, a week, a month, that's investment. When I say taking this time, it reminds me of a quote from Abraham Lincoln. And he said, if I had 6 hours to cut down a tree, I would spend 4 of them sharpening my axe. Take that time. That's it again, take that time. Afford yourself that time, because that time is valuable. That is an investment that is going to see you through. Identify what it is that you really want, that you can hold fast, that you're going to maintain your grip of through thick and thin, through those first 2 months, and see you through all the way to the end of the year. Second tip, why do you want it? You know what it is that you want. You know that it's important to you, but identify, write down why. I know I'm talking about writing again. Some of you might not be writers, but put it on paper so it's there. You can look at it and explore. If you can have this idea and then expand that beyond what it is into why you want it, then you have motivations, you have incentives, and you have reasons behind this thing which is really important to you. And instead of just having this goal, you have all the things that you will then get from this goal. And it reminds me of a quote from Nietzsche, who said, "He who has a why can endure almost any how." If you have a reason, if you have that North Star, then you can endure anything, almost anything. You can endure a hell of a lot. That is what I'm saying. Okay, tip number 3, aim high. Don't be afraid to be ambitious with your goals. Don't be afraid to set them too high, knowing that you might not achieve them all. Michelangelo says, the greatest danger for most of us is not that our aim is too high and we miss it, but that our aim is too low and we reach it. That has been adapted into, what I initially thought was that very cliche saying of, if you aim for the stars, you might reach the moon. But aim high, because if you aim exceptionally high, and by the end of the year, you only achieve 30% of the progress that you wanted to make in reaching that final goal, that 30% will be far, far greater than the 30% if you had set that goal a little bit lower. So aim high, but understand and try and accept that you might not reach that incredibly high goal because it's incredibly high for a reason. Have your goal either set on par with or just below the point of unattainability. Because it's that thing with striving for excellence. If you're always striving for something that is just beyond that reach, then you will only grow further and further along the way. Okay, tip number 4, break down your goal. Break down your resolution, your goal, whichever form this thing is taking. Figure out a process of how it is that you're going to get to it. If you set off the start of the new year, smash this one goal, get it all in one, probably not going to happen, is it? But if you can break down this big mammoth thing into smaller, more manageable goals, then those are little things that you can chip away at. Those are things that you can focus your attention on wholly at one time. Get that, then the next, move forward. My dad said to me, the best way to eat a whale is one bite at a time. You're not going to be able to fit a whole whale in your goal. I'd love to see you try, but you probably won't be able to do it. If you can, please write in. We'll get our camera crew out to you. So that's what my dad has to say. Miyamoto Musashi has to say, one step at a time on a 1,000-mile road. Take it one step at a time, one bite at a time, and eventually, through consistency, you'll get there. So something that I have learned recently, step number 5, or tip number 5, is once you figure out how to get there, once you figure out a process of attaining that goal, once you figure out the steps that you need to take over time that will eventually capture that whole goal, not capture, but you know what I mean. Once you figure out how to get it, cross out that goal. So if you've got a lovely list and a goal at the top of it, cross out the goal. Forget about the goal and focus on the process. Focus on those tips. Now, the value that I've learned in doing this is you don't then have the pressure. I put myself under a lot of pressure to do things and to do things well, or to do things to the best of my ability. And when I would do them, I would always have this thing, shit, fuck, this is why I'm doing it. Okay, right, this is the thing that's hanging over me, underlined at the top of the page. This is your goal. Once you get rid of that, it alleviates some of the pressure of getting to that point. You're not going to put all that weight, put all that expectation and that need to get there. And if you can then focus on the process, trust the process, chip away at it, work at it, and just figure out what you're going to do each day to progress yourself towards doing those things, then eventually you will get to your goal, and you'll do so in likely much more healthy, happy way. So it will be an enjoyable process. But that's where I learned how to trust the process. Tip number 6, build momentum through action. So they say motivation does not precede action, but action precedes motivation. You're going to have a much harder time sitting around waiting for the motivation to do something before you get up and act. The best thing to do is to start by doing little steps. That's why a lot of people say, start of the day, clean your room. As Brandon said, it's those 1%, those valuable 1% which build up and accumulate and compound over time. That will give you the motivation that you need to do something more, to maybe move on to 2%, to handle those things which are a little bit more difficult, because you've already got the momentum of having done the little things step by step. And I mentioned earlier about Abraham Lincoln's 6 hours to cut down a tree. he'd spend 4 of them sharpening his axe. Now, I took that to heart earlier in the year. And what that meant to me is I need to know exactly what I'm doing 100%, and then I'm going to do it. You know, proportionately, if you had 6 hours to cut down the tree, he's going to spend 2/3 of that time sharpening his axe. Right, I've got 2/3 of the time that I want to do this thing in. I'm going to spend that planning. That's all well and good. You got to have a plan, sure. But if you don't ever act on it, nothing's going to get done. And I realised using that quote from Abraham Lincoln, he probably didn't spend the first 4 hours sharpening his axe. And what I realised in my own actions from avoidance, as I mentioned earlier in the episode, it's one thing to sharpen your axe, but at some point you got to hoist that motherfucker and swing at the tree. You got to make that cut. You got to chop it. You got to do it. You got to take that leap. You got to take that action. And once you start taking that action, once you start putting that first dent in that tree, it starts getting a little bit blunt. Sure, go away, sharpen it a little. But you got to make that first cut. Take that action. Raise that axe. Swing again. So those are my steps for how you can possibly see your goal, your resolution through. You have the ammunition from last year. You've accepted and rounded up 2023. You have that all with you. You have it all close to your heart, and hopefully you have it somewhere that you can refer to. You have what it is that you want out of 2024. Looking back at 2023, you know that in a year's time you won't be the same person. You know that in a year's time you have choice over who you could be. And now you have things, hopefully, if you've kind of followed along with this episode. If you haven't, we just thank you for listening anyway. You know the things that are important to you. You know why they're important to you. You're loaded. You have an arsenal of your own best interests ready to do some damage. And January and February aren't going to seem like shit if you keep going, if you stay consistent, and if you keep pursuing the things that are important to you the most important to you. And if all else fails, I believe in you. I believe that you can do it. So best of luck. 2024. We've got big goals, we've got big aspirations, and we hope that you are busy undertaking yours while watching us undertake ours. And hopefully, during 2024, we can grow together. So this is an incredibly important part of today's episode. New Year's is a very, very difficult time for a lot of people. For everyone, it's not an opportunity, but it's the start of something which can seem incredibly difficult to face. I've certainly been there. The whole year ahead, you might have had a horrendous year, and the idea of having to face a new one is equally, if not more, terrifying. So we just wanted to take a moment and say, if you are in those positions, we have a few places which might be able to give you the help that we at the show, as much as we'd like to offer you, we cannot. So, first of all, if you're struggling, if you're in that place of crisis, then the Samaritans are always somebody that you can call. There's always be someone there that you can ring up and chat to for whatever reason. And you can reach them at 116 123. Mind.org are fantastic. They are the pioneers of the modern mental health sphere. They're a charity, so there are things that you can donate if you're not suffering at the moment. However, if you are, there are also people that you can reach out to, support that you can help, or support that you can get, or people that you can get help from. They're an excellent, wonderful community of mental health proactive individuals, and they are doing some really fantastic work, and you can either be a part of that and support them, or they can be the people that you might need if you feel you need some extra help. Your GP is always a good one to go to, but if you're not ready to go to them, then perhaps one of these will be a better alternative. But I started mine by going to my GP, so please don't consider that as beyond one of the options that are available to you, because they are professionals. They're not just for the body, but if you do have mental illness problems, or you think that you might, your GP is a very valid option. WHO, or the World Health Organization, are fantastic for information and learning. They are more data and statistics led. However, I have begun to understand that a big part of our audience aren't necessarily people who are suffering from mental health or mental ill health, but the majority of people, full stop, know somebody that is struggling or has struggled, or unfortunately is too late. So as a part of being proactive, as a part of educating through experience, when we're not educating through experience, World Health Organization have the data, they have the statistics to help you get clued up and knowledgeable about what is going on at this time in the world of mental health. And that can be very beneficial to just broaden your mind about what it is and the realities that we're facing. And they may give you some tips as to how you can support people that might be afflicted with these illnesses. And ACAS, they are beneficial and they provide support for employers or employees. So if your workplace is difficult or is a detriment to your mental health, or for whatever reason work is something that is negatively impacting your mental health, they have people that you can reach out to for help and support and professional advice. Thank you for taking the time to join us today. We're looking forward to the new year, but if you're in a position where you're not, then I still believe in you. I still think that you can do it, and I still think things can get better for you. We hope that you're having a good year. We hope that you've had a good day and a New Year's and a good holiday. We hope that you join us for next week's episode. And we'll keep working towards improving mental well-being, giving you the tools that you need to fight back against mental illness and mental ill health. Thanks. That's all for today. This has been a Common Bird production.